One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is David Harris. David is currently the Director of Athletics at the University of Northern Iowa. Greetings, David. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to have you on again, actually. Looking at your career, you're entering your third year there as Director of Athletics at Northern Iowa. You spent time in Mississippi and Wisconsin. Of course, you spent, a good amount of time there with Jamie Pollard in terms of the leadership aspect and who you worked for. And you've been in college athletics for, 20 years now. And when you look back at what you've done, you spent the early part of your career working in student athlete services. And over time, you added sport oversight, leading to your current position now as Director of Athletics. I'm interested in that path and that transition. Can you give us some insight on the path and some of the key leadership or organizational decisions that you made as you were coming up that made people like a Jamie Pollard take notice of you and give you those promotions and give you sport oversight?
Sure. From my perspective, I think about three things primarily when I consider my own path from starting in athletics 20 years ago until now. One of which is working hard and doing the very best you can with whatever you're asked to do. Secondly, relationships and the importance that they play. And then third, being willing to get out of your comfort zone. All of those things were critical at one time or another for me. So when I think about starting in athletics in 1998, working in academic services at Ole Miss, and how I made the transition from there to working at Wisconsin, it was really unexpected. It goes to getting out of your comfort zone. I can remember, in addition to working in academic services, I was also involved with life skills. And there was a national life skills conference being held. And I remember them sending out an email asking for people who were willing to facilitate pieces of the conference. If I remember correctly, you'd have the conference during the day, and then each afternoon or each evening, you would break up into groups to discuss what you had learned during the day. And they were looking for people to lead those groups that were happening in the evening. So it wasn't something I had done before. I just decided that I would get out of my comfort zone and volunteer to do it, and I actually ended up being chosen. So I went to the conference. I facilitated those discussions and really didn't think much of it after that. Well, one day, and I'd actually applied for a position prior to this situation coming up. I'd applied to a position, I hadn't been selected for it, and then out of the blue, the University of Wisconsin called me and said that they had a position as director of their academic support program open, and they wanted to know if I was interested in it. And when I asked how they had even come to find out about me, they said that someone who had been in the group that I'd facilitated actually had recommended me. So they knew. The gentleman's name was Steve McDonald. If you've worked in academic services or even in athletics for the past, several years, you probably have heard his name. He just so happened to be in my group. I didn't know Steve at all. We had never met. And it just so happened that the people who were doing the search at Wisconsin knew Steve and reached out to him because they had gone through the search process and hadn't found anyone. So they were kind of going back out to try to find someone. They contacted Steve for recommendations, and he gave them my name just based on that situation where I was facilitating that conference. So something I never would have expected when I signed up to do that, but it just worked out that I went ahead and talked with them, did the interview, and ended up getting the position at Wisconsin running their academic support program. Then moving forward, after I got the position, my first couple of years, I can remember arriving, and one of the big challenges was that the freshman football study hall needed more structure, and they were wanting to know what I was going to do to try to add more structure and make sure that the guys were getting out of it what they were supposed to get out of it, and that they weren't causing problems to other student athletes who wanted to study. And so what I decided to do was just to run the freshman football study hall myself. And so I was working long days, coming in. I was new, so I was coming in 7 o'clock in the morning and working till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, just working straight through, taking a break to get something to eat, but then coming back and being there for the 2.5 hours to run study hall. Well, it just so happened that Barry Alvarez was a football coach there. He was in his last couple of years, and little did I know that after my first 2 years, Coach Alvarez would then transition to being the athletics director. And Coach Alvarez was very appreciative of the time and effort that I put into investing in football and running the freshman football study hall and doing things that he thought needed to be done to make sure that those guys were getting their education. So when he became an athletics director, he met with me and said, I want to promote you to our senior leadership team. I want you to be an associate AD. And so that was the next step in my progression. And it was just based on putting my head down and trying to work as hard as I could and doing what I thought needed to be done to try to help the program have success. Never anticipating that things were going to transpire as they did. I had no sense that Coach Alvarez was going to become the AD or that that's even something that he wanted to do.
Right, but there's something to say about seeing that problem, that it wasn't structured. Of course, the people you reported to asked you, what are you going to do about it? And you went in and took the initiative and provided organization to something that was unorganized. And as a leader, you always want people who can come in and solve problems and make something look great from chaos. And I imagine, like you said, that's what Coach Alvarez saw.
Right, and that's ultimately what I tried to do in that situation, was to bring some structure to make sure that those guys, because they were all freshmen and they were all in need of some structure as far as how we would do things. And so we had a good time. We tried to make it fun for them. We tried to make it informative. We made sure that they got their work done. We talked about things that were bigger than athletics as well. That's maybe the thing that I remember about it more than anything, is that each of those evenings we would talk about topics, current events, other things that we felt like were important, because I felt like having those discussions were as important as the work that they were doing. So I just really poured myself into trying to do that work. Well, with the resulting promotion that came from that, I ended up reporting to Jamie Pollard, because when Coach Alvarez made the transition, there was a 1-year time period where he was the athletics director and the head football coach at the same time. And so he needed someone to be the deputy AD to run the department on a day-to-day basis. And Jamie was there as a CFO, so he promoted Jamie to be the deputy AD and run the department day-to-day. And so my reporting line was directly to Jamie. And so Jamie and I began to further our relationship and talk, and I was working directly for him on an everyday basis. And so I talked to him some about, what I wanted to do with my career and what I'd like my next step to be. I talked to him about getting into sport oversight and doing some other things, and I can remember him telling me that there just was an opportunity to be able to do that at that time at Wisconsin. Well, little did I know that Jamie, at some point after that, ends up accepting the position as the athletics director at Iowa State. And when that position becomes available, then Jamie contacts me and asks me about coming to work there for him as one of his senior associate ADs, overseeing several areas, getting into sport oversight. At that time, the sport was football. After I got there, he had on men's basketball and wrestling. So that move came from a relationship that was developed over time with he and I working together closely. So whether it was getting out of my comfort zone with the initial move or just putting my head down and working hard with the second move, to a relationship that really transpired and helped me make the move to Iowa State, those are the things that I really look back on. And then the same thing happened with my move to UNI to the athletics director position. I was recommended by the former president at Iowa State, Stephen Leith, who's now the president at Auburn, to the former president at UNI, Bill Rood, when that position came open, and Troy Dannon decided to go and work at Tulane University as athletics director. Dr. Leaf recommended me to President Rood. President Rood and I had a conversation that led to me applying for the position and ultimately getting the position a couple of years ago.
You said a number of things there, and one thing I want to touch on was the initial thing you said, being uncomfortable, going into somewhere that's uncomfortable and then succeeding in an uncomfortable position. When you started getting responsibilities, right, with those responsibilities, you have to make responsible decisions. And I imagine that, when they put these responsibilities on you, sport oversight and things like that, you probably had to have tough conversations and make decisions that you didn't make before, which were probably uncomfortable to you. What was your approach to doing that then? And I assume you probably still have to have tough conversations and make decisions that are uncomfortable for you now as an AD.
That's a significant part of leadership in any position that I've been in, your willingness to be able to be uncomfortable, to do things new in order to grow as a professional and gain a new perspective on things, on the department, on the way that things work. And part of that is being willing to have difficult conversations when they become necessary. And that's one of the more important aspects of leading, no matter what position in the department you happen to be in. So from an approach standpoint, I think you're always looking initially to come in and listen, talk with people, find out what's going on, see what the culture is, get a sense of what's happened before you evaluate things fairly, and try to develop relationships with as many people as you possibly can. And then making the best decision that you can based on the information that you've gathered, based on your background, the perspective that you bring to the situation, making sure that you're trying to talk to the people who are impacted directly, being clear about why you're making any change that you're making, having them understand that this is about the business of trying to make the department better, make whatever it is that you're running better. It's not personal about them or something that they've done outside of what their responsibility is from a professional standpoint, and then trying to move forward in the best way that you possibly can. There is no guidebook or rule book for how you go about doing those things. You have to rely on your experience, you rely on your instinct, you rely on what other people have shared with you, you rely on what you see on a day-to-day basis, and then you have to make the very best decision that you can. You have to be able to back it up. You have to make sure that people are dealt with in a respectful manner. You try to put people in their positions of strength, and sometimes that requires change as well. And then it's about, after the decision has been made, this is the part that sometimes people forget. It's one thing to make the decision. It's another thing to manage the decision after it's been made. So after it's been put into place, then what are you doing to make sure that you have the optimal chance to be able to have success?
That's true. And I'd imagine over time, with the supervisors and leaders you worked for, and now in your position of leadership, the relationship garners trust, and the trust garners the leader's ability to believe that you will make good decisions in that position. And that brings me to my next question. As you lead the department and lead people who are in positions that you've been in before, what is your approach to leadership in terms of people who you see may be similar to you as you were coming up, or other people you've seen coming up, and then them gaining your trust to make decisions and tough decisions, and actually you putting them in uncomfortable positions to see how they come out and if they can make successful choices?
Well, from my standpoint, I'm a big believer in mentorship. I'm a big believer in trying to give people an opportunity to be able to grow, to expand their responsibilities, to expand their perspective. And so there are times where, in order to do that, you're going to give them responsibilities that they don't expect to get, or you're going to give them a chance to be able to make a decision that maybe they are not expecting to make. So, for instance, someone comes into my office and they bring forward a problem. They've identified a problem that needs to be dealt with, and you can just tell based on the conversation that they're bringing it to you to solve. And so from my perspective, depending on what the problem is and depending on the situation, I may step up and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. But what I like to do when opportunity presents itself is to say, okay, well, what are you coming to recommend? What do you think we should do? How do you think we should handle this? And put it back on them to at least begin the process of thinking like a decision maker, like a problem solver, understanding that I need them to be a problem solver, that we need to have a department full of problem solvers, and they're not going to be able to solve every one of them. Some of them I should be solving. But there are many others that if they're willing to take the initiative, then they can solve. And so I really want to push them and have them understand. And if they don't have a solution at that moment, I will say, hey, well, you know what? I need you to bring forward a recommendation on what you think should happen here. Or there could be a situation where someone who would like to be an AD and one of their concerns is they don't feel like they're good at public speaking. So when you're asked to do something, to speak at some event, it may be, hey, I'm going to bring this person in and let them do the speech. I'm going to encourage them or push them or tell them that I want them to speak at this particular event because I have, more than enough speaking engagements to go around. So there's always an opportunity for me to be able to pull someone in and say, I'd like for you to do this. I think it'd be a good practice for you to go speak at this particular event. Or there's a media situation where they're looking for comment. The media's looking for comment on the situation, and instead of doing it as an AD, I may ask the person who's actually over that area to actually go and call the media member back and do the interview because I feel like that'd be a good thing for them to do. So for me, it's about finding those opportunities within a given day to be able to push them forward, or giving them projects that maybe would have fallen on my desk and ask them to work on it, ask them to take a piece of it, asking them to be in charge of it. But really it's an understanding that I really want to invest in them, and that by investing in them, we're investing in our department. And I realize that for many of them, they're not necessarily going to spend a lifetime working for me or working at our university. They're going to go forward, and I'd like them to look back on that time and feel that they were prepared for the next step in their career based, at least in some part, on some of the things that we were able to do together. I feel like that's what some of the people who helped me did for me, and so I want to do that for those that I have an opportunity to be able to work with.
Right, and I imagine they appreciate that too. There's one last thing here. When people bring solutions to you, even if the solution isn't the best, there's probably a healthy appreciation for you as a leader of them bringing a solution and actually looking at their thought process on how they would address the problem would probably allow you to think about them in future positions or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's about the initiative. It's not always about whether or not you're nailing the solution with your first time out. It's really about getting people who understand that we need them to be problem solvers. We need them to be looking around and figuring out how can they take the initiative to make the department better. And they may not have a fully formed, perfect idea, or they may have a great idea and not have the perfect way to be able to execute it. But just the idea that they are willing to put themselves in a space where they're going to get out of the comfort zone of, I have a problem, I take it to the boss solves the problem. I think if you talk to ADs across the country, they would say the people who tend to get promoted, they get elevated, they get different responsibilities, they get more responsibility, are the ones who show that they can not only identify problems, but they can identify solutions, and you can trust them to go forward and implement that solution in a way that's going to be in the best interest of your department. And so when I'm working with any of my staff members, and you mentioned earlier about people who have done work similar to what I've done. So in the student services area, for me, even though I feel like I have a lot of responsibility and a lot of background, a lot of experience in that area, I can't put myself in a position where I'm spending more time in that area just because it's the area that I'm comfortable with. You're asked to be the director of athletics and everything that entails, and that doesn't just entail working in the areas that you've had success in or that you've had experience in. It means working in every area, and so you have to empower the people who are doing what you have done, the same way you do with everybody else. You can't look over their shoulder. You can't second guess what they're trying to do just because you have experience in that area. But I think the people who work in the area that you worked in know and understand automatically that I'm going to be working with someone who understands this area. And so if I was thinking about coming in and not doing a good job, or if I don't have fully formed ideas, or if I'm not really bringing it on an everyday basis, then this person's going to figure that out pretty quickly. And so you give them the same chance that everybody else has. You want to empower them, you want to encourage them, and you want to set them up to have success, and use your experience hopefully to help mentor and guide them to be able to figure things out for themselves.
All right. Well, David, this has been an excellent conversation. It sounds like you take some of the things you've learned from the people you've worked for and the people you worked with. It's like Jamie Pollard and Barry Alvarez, and you've done what I call put it back in the bucket, right? You glean from the bucket as you come up in your career and get to the position of leadership. And then as you move forward, you develop those that come behind you and you put it back in the bucket and help them get to where they want to be. This has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
That was David Harris. He's the Director of Athletics at University of Northern Iowa. He's going on his third year there at UNI, and he's doing a great job in developing those that work for and work with him. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.